I mean, that's the point, Nick, is that people hear about this and it's talked about in the pub and you know, on the touchline watching Johnny play football on a Saturday, and people are talking about this. And for most investors, they kind of say, well, I've heard of this, but I don't really understand it. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to get people a broader understanding of how it works, of what the risks are, of how not to be defrauded if you get involved in this. And that's why on the 26th of April, next week at 2 p.m., you know, we've got an online seminar. If you want to be part of this, there's no commitment to it at all. But if you want to try and find out a little bit more about this world, please click the link after this video. Come and join us next Tuesday, because we're trying to hold people's hands, you know, through what looks like a maze to most people, but actually there are some ways through.
Hello and welcome to This Week in Review with Nigel Farage. Nigel, let's start with a story that you said last week was very much underappreciated by the British investment public, and that was the French presidential debate. Can you take us through what ended up happening?
Yeah, because in 2017, Marine did terribly in the debate, and you know, she sort of collapsed down to 35% of the vote when we all thought she'd get 42 or 43. This time round, it's different. She's performed much better in the debate. But she hasn't managed to crush Macron. And so I think that the polls are probably right, that he's going to win, I don't know, 53, 47 or whatever. I mean, still, you know, it's a remarkably close result that's coming for what is a presidential election, you know, in a major European country and an EU founder, you know, and kind of here we have the barbarians very much at the gates. So they'll, you know, if we get the result I think is going to happen, there'll be a sort of collective sigh of relief in Brussels and from George Soros and all the globalists, but they should be in no doubt that the peasants are revolting.
I'm not so sure I would want to win this presidential election given what's going on in the economy. I think there was a French journalist who said it's a question of, do they fear Le Pen more or do they hate Macron more? And I think that summed it up for me. Let's move on though to the real story which we wanted to cover, which is not so much the price action in Bitcoin, but the community action that's taking place. And we had the Bitcoin 2022 conference with PayPal founder Peter Thiel making some very interesting comments that you wanted to discuss.
Yeah, so Miami was the center for this big Bitcoin conference, probably the biggest the world's ever seen. Why Miami? Well, I'll tell you why Miami. Because the mayor, Suarez, who I met last year, wants Miami to become the first all Bitcoin, all crypto city. So that, you know, you can go to Starbucks and just sort of swipe a card and pay with a tiny fraction of a Bitcoin or an Ether to buy your coffee. And he is utterly determined that that's where Miami is going. And it's a theme that we've covered. You know, whatever the FT say or the Bank of England, and they warn you it's all going to be worthless. The fact is, across America, cryptocurrency is now in wholesale, widespread usage. What was really interesting was that Peter Thiel, who's been a friend of mine for over 10 years, you know, one of the great West Coast innovators, you know, the founder of PayPal, and he was on the board of Facebook. And I mean, this is one of the really big dudes in this whole new world that's emerged in the last 20 years. And Peter's a very calm, very considered, very thoughtful, I would actually say slightly understated. You know, he's not Elon Musk, you know. And for him to get up at that conference and say the things that he said, and for it to get as little exposure as it did, is why we want to share it with our audience here. Basically, Peter said that the Warren Buffetts and all these people, you know, are basically dinosaurs. But he also pointed out, even though they publicly have been condemning the crypto world, privately, they are beginning to invest in it. And I think that's the point that really came across. So number one, absolutely slated the existing financial services community, and it's the Jamie Dimons, it's all these people. And just said, look, guys, this is happening. And just the way that he did it, I thought was very dramatic and very interesting. And secondly, and look, you can take it or leave it, right? And you can say, well, you know, Thiel's long to the gazooks of crypto, so he would say this. But he basically said he thinks in the next years to, and I don't mean the next fortnight, guys, but in the next years to come, it could multiply in price 100-fold. Now, we are not here advocating that what Thiel says is correct, but we have been saying that its widespread adoption and usage, combined with, without a doubt, falling trust in fiat money, as we see the results of huge money printing feeding through into inflation and the cost of living, leads us to believe that it is sensible for investors to have some exposure to this. Now, I've tried to put that as, it's high risk, it's unregulated, I get all of that, but that's been our position, Nick, for over a year. And I just think when somebody of the import, stature of Peter Thiel says these things at a big conference, and when mainstream media literally refuse to cover the comments this man has made, given that he's got so much right, I think he's worth about $20 billion. I mean, it may not sound much to some, I don't know. But, I just think it's something I wanted to flag to our people.
Yeah, I'm going to add some meat to that structure. He called Warren Buffett a sociopathic grandpa and enemy number one. He called Jamie Dimon of JPMorgan Chase and Larry Fink part of a finance gerontocracy, which is a state that is controlled by an elderly group. So it is out of date. And I think that's the key point that he was making, and I think also that we make, is that there's this legacy financial system that is out of date, hasn't served its customers well. And then there's this new system. Now, you and I both think there's lots of potential in this new system. We're not completely convinced that it's going to take over the world and destroy the gerontocracy, but we think it's worth taking the time to learn about, to understand. And there is a good chance.
I mean, that's the point, Nick, is that people hear about this and it's talked about in the pub and on the touchline watching Johnny play football on a Saturday, and people are talking about this. And for most investors, they kind of say, well, I've heard of this, but I don't really understand it. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to get people a broader understanding of how it works, of what the risks are, of how not to be defrauded if you get involved in this. And that's why on the 26th of April, next week at 2 p.m., we've got an online seminar. If you want to be part of this, there's no commitment to it at all. But if you want to try and find out a little bit more about this world, please click the link after this video. Come and join us next Tuesday, because we're trying to hold people's hands, through what looks like a maze to most people, but actually there are some ways through. There are some ways, or I should say, given that it's a maze, there are some ways out that will give you a clearer understanding of what's really going on. I think it's really important.
Yeah, that event's called New Money, New Rules. And like Nigel says, there'll be a link at the end of this video. But the part of that I want to really latch onto is the idea that there's lots of people who are really upset with the legacy financial system. It hasn't served them, but they're not sure about this whole Bitcoin cryptocurrency thing. And I think those are the people that we should try and reach, and that you are trying to reach in that event on Tuesday. And I want to read a quick quote from Thiel. It's a movement, and it's a political question whether this movement is going to succeed or whether the enemies of the movement are going to succeed in stopping us. And that's part of what this is about. It's that the financial system is trying to stop what cryptocurrencies have done and are doing, because they know just how much of a threat it is to them. So for those of you out there who are thinking that you don't like the mainstream legacy financial system, but you're not so sure about cryptocurrencies, then New Money, New Rules is for you. So click on the link below. There's one more point that Thiel made that I want to quickly dig into, and that was his mention of gold and Bitcoin. And he suggested that Bitcoin's value could overtake gold's value, which would still be a huge surge in Bitcoin. But he pointed out that the same forces are driving both of those. What are those forces? Inflation,
lack of trust in money, and understanding that in the last 2 years, 28% of all dollars in circulation, 28% of all dollars that have ever been produced have been produced since 2020. Is it any wonder that we've got inflation? Is it any wonder that there is, a lack of confidence in these currencies and in the way our governments manage them? So what you're looking at really are hedges. You're looking at hedges. Gold has been a traditional hedge, for all of these things. And by the way, I don't think anything Thiel has said is bearish for gold at all. So he's not being negative about gold. So it's the size and speed of adoption of cryptocurrency. It's the accessibility of it on every one of these. It's really easy peasy. And, there's no, holding gold, there are some downsides. You've got to pay rent and insurer, all that sort of thing. So as I say, it's not negative about gold at all. I don't think we change our stance on that one little bit. It's just that this is something astonishing that is happening very, very quickly. And already, despite skepticism, despite lack of knowledge, there's at least 2 million Brits that have been involved with cryptocurrency in some way. And what Thiel is saying is within a few years, that's going to be 10 million. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I think it's less of a dramatic leap than it used to be to say that the Bitcoin adoption was going to be a big thing. Just quickly mentioning, there is some warm-up content that goes out to people who sign up to that event on Tuesday now, which is another reason to click on that link. I've seen that warm-up material. It's very valuable and interesting, so I encourage you to sign up now. Nigel, thanks for joining us, and to everyone at home, thanks for watching.